Yo guys, Visionist Gen here, back with more Call of Duty Zombies content, and today's episode will be around Voyage of Despair, one of my personal favourites in Cod Zombies, a controversial pick I know, but with an amazing map layout, elemental weapons and zombies, various different boss zombies, a challenging and unique easter egg, with arguably the coolest and hardest boss fights, which of course that's debatable for various different factors, which I'll go over in this video. This is episode 6 of the zombie series with my previous episodes, all linked in the description below, so on that note, let's get on into it. So just as an overview, just the first things first, I'm going to sort of throw it out there that this map is incredible, and personally I think overhated within the community. I've seen all sort of mixed opinions on this and reviews about this map in general, and I appreciate back in its prime when the blue screening was a problem for the game in general, this was a real problem and a really shit experience to play as a map in general. But I do think that this map has aged really well, and like I said, overhated for the most part. I appreciate Black Ops 4 has a stigma as a whole, just generally with how the game did during its prime, specifically with zombies, and again, like I said, with the blue screening. But I think how the maps have aged and how they compare to previous CODs, I get it. There's factors which can hinder the overall experience of Black Ops 4 Zombies, but the original 3 maps that came out on launch, I think, are criminally underrated and really fun for the most part. When other maps are ranked, they can be determined by high round potential, replayability, Easter eggs, boss fights, elemental weapons, map layout, enjoyable features within the map itself that make it unique, as well as like nostalgic elements such as like what the map was like in its prime, how it fared against previous maps of its own kind, and how it's grown as in time and how it's gone on and stuff like that. These are all sort of factors, as well as like groundbreaking aspects and what it did for the community and so on. So as you can see, many different factors, and for me, I personally really like this map and I've ranked it really highly compared to most other players. It has a great layout, very complex, but with the Sentinel artifact, the portals for fast travel, and a literal Titanic replica, giving you the cool experience of being able to explore the ship itself with so much cool and unique detail. It really allows for a unique experience, a memorable map, something I really liked and sort of referred back to when I thought about Black Ops 4. This is the first one that always comes to mind, especially for newer players as well, for sort of the great replayability aspect as well that I think, in my opinion. I've also replayed this map countless times myself and never got bored of it, just literally never. I found it almost too challenging at times rather than it being boring. I've literally never got to that stage. You can do the Easter egg solo, albeit I do find that the final boss fight is definitely challenging. Although manageable solo, the elemental Krakens are incredible. Although not better than the Starves of Origins or the Bows of Horizon Tracker, it's still a very cool map and kept this trend. I like that it's sort of kept the elemental aspect in Black Ops with another title, having access to elemental wonder weapons once again. And who knows, maybe some people believe that these are better than the Starves of Bows, but I'll leave that for you guys up to sort of to decide. Let me know down below in the comments if you think that the Krakens or the Bows or the Starves, which ones are the best. Let me know, because I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I personally think it's the Bows, and then I changed my opinion to the Starves because it's nostalgic, and so I always change my opinion back and forth between the two. But I do think the Krakens are really cool, not too overpowered by any means. And just remember, other players' list is their own opinion, and unless you are all voting off the same criteria with regards to maps or even elemental weapons, each are to their own views. So we got to respect each other's personal lists and what that means to them, as some people just base their own lists on their individual experiences and what the map meant to them during the time it was around in its prime. And that's completely fair, and I get that, and I'll appreciate anybody's list, but I just am interested to hear other people's thoughts on both the weapon and the map in general. Now, the Easter egg itself at the time was definitely challenging. It still is even to this day, especially as a 4-man, as there are obviously more zombies on the map. During the outlet and portal step, this is really challenging, especially on the planet steps as well, and at the time trial stage, the frozen icebergs blocking your path, which all in all was very difficult back in the day. And I must admit, I remember struggling with my team back in the day on this map, and the Easter egg, due to sort of the blue screening aspect around the planet step, it always used to fail on that step. I don't know why, and we had to cut it down from 4 players to 3 players, because I think back then, some reason, if you had 4 players, you were more likely to crash the map with more zombies and so on. So I think we had to do it back in the day with only 3 players, and I just sort of didn't like that aspect. But again, I wasn't going to hold that back against on the map, because that was a Black Ops 4 issue. And with surviving on this map in general, I think it's definitely really difficult, and I can't really put my sort of name on where I can't particularly remember the best high round spot on this map, or even if it had one, because just generally running around this map is harder than most other maps. The map has elemental zombies, which I love. I think they're really cool. The gas, the fire, the water, and the electric, they're all just really cool aspects and brings another sort of different variety to the game, although very similar, and provides that familiarity feeling with the likes of dealing with elemental aspects before. It just is nice to have a different but also similar aspect as well. And then of course, not to forget the Stokers, the ones who wield the shovel and fire the little mangler sort of style attack at you with fire, and obviously drop the key to get the free Kraken as well if you defeat them. And then of course the Blight Fathers, which makes the map more challenging, and the Easter egg experience too. But I sort of think that the more challenging the map is, the more memorable and enjoyable it is, because it's sort of that prideful element, knowing you completed something that was really challenging. Completing something that's really easy doesn't really fulfill me and feel like I actually did much. Knowing that I had to spend sort of several different attempts or hours and hours and hours trying to complete something, that makes it more memorable. Although it obviously is much more challenging and difficult, and makes it sort of harder to do and really annoying at times, because you can definitely get frustrated. Believe me, I have definitely had my fair shares of getting frustrated at all of these maps. But for me, I like the fact that this map is so challenging, which makes it so much more rewarding. And you'll hear my reaction, my genuine reaction at the end of the video, of what it was like for me to experience and doing this for the first time, especially especially on solo. I've never done it before on solo. I did it back in the sort of in its prime, back in the day with 3 players, but I've never done it on my own solo until this point back into today. This was done about a month or so ago, and this is something I really enjoyed doing. Now, me and my cousin back in the day is who I played all of these zombies with back in the day, doing all the Easter eggs together. And for Black Ops 4, I actually then had my brother who used to play with us too, which is really cool because it sort of meant that we had 3 good players playing zombies for the first time in my sort of playing time. So when this game came out, me, my cousin, and my brother, and then we had a fourth, which was basically the 3 of us who really understood zombies, and we had a good, strong sort of 3-man team who could carry Easter eggs, which was strange for me because having to this point, it was always me and my cousin, and I didn't really know what it was like to be carried through an Easter egg. Like knowing to have another player who knew what they were doing and at points were guiding me through them, especially IX, which I feel like I didn't even do it personally. So practically, I was carried through that entire Easter egg. So I'm actually excited to play IX again and to re-experience that one solo because doing the Easter egg all by myself is something going to be very new to me and challenging for me. But anyways, back to Voyage. Just like I said in my previous sort of episode on Horizon Draco, if you haven't seen it, that's episode 5, the last episode that just came out last week. When we did this Easter egg back in its prime, I remember the scream of relief and joy having finally defeated the giant eye boss. Like I said, there's a reaction at the end which is similar again on this one round because it just feels and hits the same. I was so excited to finally have done it for 2 different reasons. One, because the difficulties that we encountered, like with the fact of the blue screening and stuff like that kept ruining our previous attempts, and to finally get one without this issue and to sort of complete it for the first time and killing the eye for the first time is something I remember very clearly and such a cool experiences that I like to really sort of relive and reimagine again, which is something I've really sort of enjoyed doing this time round. Now, for the overall Easter experience, I think is a great one in my opinion. Of course, there are some real challenging and sort of RNG steps, which I guess most maps have their own sort of their own individual sort of intricate details that no one really likes, and I don't use that ever as a factor to hold a map back in my opinion. I think when you get the hang of this map and the Easter egg, you can literally fly through this one with ease without any gobblegums until of course the boss fight. Obviously you can use them without that, but I would personally definitely recommend using gobblegums in that boss fight. As I said, it is challenging and we'll go over it in a second. Now, opening the map up, collecting the Sentinel artifact and activating the 4 pack-a-punch machines is literally the first step of this Easter egg. Pretty straightforward. It's something you would do anyway without having to do the Easter egg, and of course if you do interact with your touch tab on PlayStation, you can literally get a wheel that shows you how far and how well you're progressing through the Easter egg on this map. Now, the second step is confusing. The clocks, at first I thought this was definitely going to be a ridiculously hard Easter egg and I couldn't get the hang of it, although if you have done the Easter egg before, it is pretty straightforward and easy once you get the hang of it, but for the first time it does come across really confusing. There's essentially 6 clocks around the map. 4 of them will be required for this step. Nearby the clocks, there will basically be 4 symbols, 2 triangles, an up and a down one, and then 2 more triangles, but they basically have dashes or strikes through them, so I call them up dash and down dash. But again, an up and down facing one, and with each symbol you essentially have to then just note down what the nearby clock reads, the timer that is on that clock by the hour and the minutes, and then note down what they are. And then basically the confusing part comes from the clocks that are closest to the full hour, and again, I'm trying to explain this and describe this as easy as possible because this is, of course, not a guide by any means, but just trying to explain my understanding and the experience of trying to figure this out was really difficult. When a clock sort of reads at 10:50 or 11:55, this is where it became a bit annoying because the big hand, or sorry, the little hand would be on 11, whereas a real clock, it wouldn't sort of be there yet at that point. So in real time, you would think if the small hand is on 11 and the actual minute is on, let's say, 50, you would think that is 10:50 because it's about to be 11. However, how you actually have to input them into the dial step is effectively you have to read them as they are. So if it says it's on 11 on the little hand, you do 11, and if the minute's obviously on 50, then you do 50. And that's effectively the struggle and what you have to understand, and what took me a couple of attempts to get my head around it, including my friends that I tried this with back in the day. You then have to put these times into 2 different sections. You have to go to the bridge on the front of the ship and go and put the minutes into the 4 different sections, which are marked with the symbols, which is why it's important you note them down. And you basically have to then just spin the dial left or right, whichever way it is, to form like a clock. And then you have to go to the back of the ship. You have to do 2 at the top of the section of the ship on the poop deck, and then you have to go down into the boiler room and do all the engine room and do the other 2 clocks and effectively just mirror those. And then the next step is a bit of RNG because from round 6 to 9, elemental zombies will then begin to spawn, and essentially just like the clocks, there are 6 electrical outlets or sockets around the map, 4 of which contain an element: gas, water, electricity, or fire. Your job is effectively to lure one of those corresponding elemental zombies towards the correct outlet and then to kill them nearby, which will then activate a portal or spawn a portal, and you'll need to go through them later. Now, the annoying part of this step is that, as I said, you can only do 1 per round of these elemental zombies, which basically means you have to go at least 4 rounds, but sometimes you won't see the elemental zombies or the corresponding remaining ones that you will need, which means you have to go through extra rounds. And as you can see, you can start and begin to fly through rounds really quickly if you're not managing this process really properly, which in the grand grand scheme of things, this is fine because you do need points anyways to get perks and the weapons or the setup that you want, etc. So it's not a big deal to go through rounds, but of course you'll want to keep it as low as possible for the actual boss fight in itself. Now, once you have all 4 portals, you effectively then have to access them, but in a specific order. So a good idea is to note down which elements you found at each outlet or portal, so you remember, of course, the order. Then the order that you have to access them in is the gas, water, electrical, and then fire. And basically on one of my attempts, I stupidly messed this step up. I was by the sort of aft section of the ship near the back, and I read on my notes that one of the portals was in the 3rd class, and just stupidly basing on where I am, thinking I'm at the back of the ship, I just went into the portal, and I instantly knew that I messed up. And I think it was like the 3rd portal, which means that I had to then go an extra round, start the whole process again, get my 4 portals, which means 4 extra rounds, and then from that point I had wasted 7 entire rounds, which basically led to me being like a really high round, and it was too late in the Easter egg, and I basically just failed. Now, once you complete that last trial in the fire portal, effectively you now have to then pack a bunch of the Sentinel artifact, which is a really cool aspect, by fixing the pipes in the turbine room with an elemental Kraken, the gas upgrade in particular, and then you're able to then shoot these broken blue pipes with this, and then once you shoot all, I think it's like the 8th pipe, the room then fills up with water, and you can then upgrade the Sentinel artifact once the Pack-a-Punch is underwater. So again, for this aspect, a bit more RNG involved here. You have to wait for the Pack-a-Punch to spawn in the turbine room, which then basically allows you to upgrade this when it's drowned and submerged underwater. And then once you've done this, you can now effectively collect the 9 symbols around the map, which represent the planets in our solar system, including the Sun, from the Sun all the way to Neptune. Pluto isn't a planet, remember that, and then the Moon resembles the Earth. And then effectively you have to activate the little solar system device, which is effectively like Gora Krovi's Nuke Step or the Moon or Horizon Tracker Samantha says. You effectively have to sort of activate this little solar system sort of miniature version of itself. You have to then see the cycle in which planets sort of flash up in different colors, and then from that point you have to then go shoot down the planets in the sky. Neptune is floating around the ship in itself, so it's this little cool blue little floating ball that's floating around the ship, and then the Moon, of course, is the Moon, but the rest of the planets are like directly above you, orbiting the Sun. It's just a really cool experience and sort of stuck out in my memory of when I sort of think about this map, and a really cool aspect and a unique experience to this map, something I really enjoy. And then effectively, once you shoot the planets in the order, of course, that corresponds to the order you saw them in on the actual little device thing, you then sort of basically, they land around the map. You have to then go collect them in a timely manner because you are timed during this. And the tricky part of this is that zombies go to all of these different same landing spots around the map, which makes it tricky to actually get the planets themselves. You basically see these blue little balls or these orbs, and you have to go collect them. And then when I did this, I didn't drain the actual engine room itself. So when I had got to the Jupiter planet, it hovers above like a stairwell where, of course, the water had risen, and I never drained it, which meant that I jumped into water, into a horde of zombies, and just died right near the end of the Easter egg, which is practically where we're at this point. It's a stupid mistake, something I learned along the way in one of my attempts. And then once you've done all the planets, the last one is always the Sun, and this is where you start the time trial. Once you activate this planet right back at the forecast or at the start where you spawn, you are effectively starting the freeze, basically to freeze on the map, and the longer you take means the more likely you are to fail on the Easter egg, which means you have to then start all over again. You essentially start in spawn, and you have to follow this pathway all the way to the back of the ship to the poop deck. The tricky part is you'll have zombies, elementals, stokers, and Blightfathers all to deal with, all whilst having to try and burn through an ice block on each sort of individual segment of the map. But using the Scepter of Ra allows you to literally fly through this, and it's amazing for this, just as a tip in case you guys didn't know it and you're going to try this. And then once you complete this, you basically get to the back on the last ice block at the back of the ship on the poop deck. You can then enter the boss fight, which is like the little portal that we saw earlier in the step, which you can then, but be warned, there's no returning from this point, so you either fail or successfully defeat the boss, which then ends the map and gives you that cool little cutscene at the end of the map in itself. And then the boss fight in itself is wicked. I think it's one of the best in my personal opinion. It takes around 20 minutes, I'd say, comprising of 5 different phases. The first 2 are pretty straightforward. You navigate tight spaces, you deal with map elements and zombies, etc., without the boss interfering. The third phase is then when you are able to, in the staterooms, the really tight and narrow corridors, which basically with minimal zombies that spawn. However, you are then challenged to now survive the giant eye beams. Basically, the attack method it has, in order to damage it, you then need to damage the eye during the laser beam phase. But of course, you then need to juggle zombies, avoid taking too much damage, and also deal damage as well. So it's a bit of a multitask skill, but once you put down like your Scepter of Ra or whatever, it's pretty straightforward. You then just sort of time it, you shoot the zombies with maybe a Kraken, and then you sort of place down your staff, and then you sort of deal damage. It's really pretty much straightforward. Phase 4 is relatively easy as well. The eye is on the side of the ship this time, and you just need to damage the eye again as it shoots the laser, but you will freeze if you're sort of too static and you're not moving around. So just make sure you are careful when you're moving around. And then the finale is the actual hard part. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I definitely struggled during this boss fight, although I am proud to say that I actually did do the actual boss fight itself first time. Not the Easter egg in general, I did attempt it multiple different times, but the boss fight itself, this was the first time, this footage right here of me completing this for the first time, so it does look pretty botty, but I am proud to say that I did not fail, and I actually got away with doing this for the first time. I did actually have Dying Wish during this, because it definitely saved me at times, and clutched up, because then when I eventually then went down again with Quick Revive, losing all of my perks, I was luckily left with PhD, which was so clutch, considering I was using the broken Helium Salvo, making killing the final boss far easier than it probably should be. All in all, it's still a great experience. And when the boss basically charges up that devastating scream attack, this is basically where the entire game can be wiped. And if you're not careful and not dealing damage to it, you can basically die, unless you of course have quick revive or have your level 3 scepter of Ra down or whatever it is to keep you up, and you will basically die if you're not careful. So just make sure you're aware of that. And basically, yeah, you have to then sort of basically juggle zombies, elementals, stokers, and blightfathers. But in the end, I ended up completing this Easter egg. Being truthful, this was actually, I think, the 6th attempt doing this Easter egg. For the first time attempting it overall since Black Ops, basically since the launch of Black Ops 4 in 2018, 2019. But overall, I really enjoyed replaying this map, and I'm seriously considering putting this map really high in my, even in my top 10 all-time maps. But until I play more of the maps, I won't go there yet. But I guess sooner or later, I am definitely going to need to create a ranking or tier list of some sort, as there's so many S and A tier maps. But basically, yeah, it's somewhere up there, high up on my list in my personal opinion. As I said at the start of the video, I know controversial, but I think in summary, the map is honestly very underrated. It's aged very well with no blue screen shambles in today's game, a really challenging experience, a cool map layout to relearn or learn for the first time in other people's cases, the elemental Krakens, dealing with the elemental zombies, the stokers, and the blightfathers, the Easter egg being so detailed and sort of memorable and challenging. I'd say this map is definitely well worth playing over and over again, especially if you guys haven't played this like me, haven't played it since launch, or if you guys haven't played it ever, I would definitely recommend it. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That's the full video. I did try to cut this down and keep it short, but as you can see, I'm very passionate about this map and zombies and Black Ops 4 in general, so I had to go on a little bit. But anyways, that's pretty much the video. As always, if you've enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any comments about anything I've mentioned in this video, whether you have any sort of preferences on your own elemental weapons, on your favorites, or even maps, let me know down below in the comments, or even tricks and or sort of tips about playing this map in general. Let me know down below in the comments, and I'll get right back to you. I'm Vision SGN. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.